Hello, everybody. This is Laura. Welcome back to Content Marketing 101, Week 2. This week, we're going to be talking about how to use customer data to inform your business and marketing strategy, particularly your marketing strategy. And we're going to have a strong emphasis on doing this in the time of COVID-19, because as we'll discuss in today's presentation, COVID-19 has sort of changed this game a little bit. And so I want to make sure that the information I'm sharing with you is really relevant and applicable in the context that we all find ourselves in right now. So that's the game plan for this evening. As always, if you have any questions, anytime between now and the next session, please feel free to email me. I'm at laura@humankindcopy.com. And you can always find that email address on the first slide of each presentation if you haven't committed it to memory. So no problem there. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about customer data. So I want to start just by asking you to think about who was your audience pre-COVID for your business or your services or whatever you might be offering, and has your audience changed since COVID hit? So I'm gonna just put about 30 seconds on the clock again, and just give you a little bit of time to think about who was your audience and has that audience changed in the past 6 months? Awesome. And that might seem like a really simple question, but I think it's important to ask to sort of test our own ability to speak clearly and fluidly about who we serve. Because it's one of those things where it can kind of just feel like we get it, we know, it's obvious or whatever. But it might not be something that we take the time to really clearly articulate. And today's presentation is going to be all about learning how to feel confident in the way you think and speak about your customer. So if this was hard, no problem. Hopefully this presentation will empower you with tools that make it easier. And if it was easy, great, well done. Hopefully this presentation will empower you with tools to go even deeper. So why are we talking about customer data in a content marketing course? The reason is that effective content marketing relies on sound customer data. That data is basically like the foundation from which our content marketing strategy should arise. And we'll take a look at why that is the case on the next slide. So customer data does a lot of things for us, and I've listed some of the big ones here. So let's go through them. And I compressed them all onto this one slide just so that it would be easy if you want to refer back to this at any point. You've got a list all in one place. But here are some of the big ticket items when it comes to customer data. It helps you target the right customers, which also means that it helps you avoid wasting resources on the wrong ones. Right? It lets you know who to speak to and who isn't necessarily a great match for your products or services. It also helps you identify your customers' pain points, needs, ideologies, perspectives, confusions, feelings, and so on. And as we talked about last week, this is really critically important when it comes to content marketing because, again, content marketing is about long-term relationship building. It's about creating a loyal audience by consistently showing up and providing value to them. And the way you provide real, meaningful value to people is by understanding what would feel valuable to them. right? And so customer data helps us know that, so we can provide things that really enhance our customers or our clients' lives. Customer data also lets you meet customers where they are with your marketing, so you can effectively capture their attention, build their trust, and develop a sustained relationship. So again, it's about knowing who your audience is, where they hang out, whether that's online or off. In this case, we'll primarily be talking about online, what they like to consume, the format in which they like to consume their content. Again, so you can meet them where they are. You can make it as frictionless or as easy as possible for them to engage with your brand and to begin building and continue building that trusting, loyal relationship. Customer data also lets you identify the right content and keywords for your audience. So again, it lets us get down to like the really nitty gritty as well as the big picture. So when it comes to like keywords and content, that's pretty nitty gritty stuff. And the only way what's going to resonate with your audience when it comes to the nitty gritty and the big picture is by gathering as much data as you can about their preferences, their attitudes, their ideologies, and so on. It also empowers you to provide customers and prospects with an experience that feels good and aligned to them for all of the reasons we mentioned. So again, you're just providing a really high quality, personalized experience because you know what people want and need from you. And finally, because of all of these reasons, customer data should inform every aspect of your website and content marketing strategy. No piece of content that you create, in my opinion, should be created without consideration for your audience and your customers and your clients, right? Anytime you're putting together a video or written copy or anything, or an infographic, anything else, it should be designed with your particular audience in mind. And again, customer data is what allows us to design in that way, thoughtfully and effectively. So if that hasn't convinced you yet, or if you're a numbers person, I sort of looked at this by the numbers as well. What's the value of customer data? And I pulled some research from Neil Patel and Clara Bridge, which finds that 55% of consumers would pay more for a better customer experience. 55%, so that's huge, right? And again, as we saw in the previous slide, one of the ways you can provide a better customer experience is by becoming more sure about who your audience is, so you can cater to them in a personalized way. 86% of B2B buyers, business-to-business buyers, would pay more for a better customer experience. So that's a really, really whoppingly big statistic. And finally, 89% of people have stopped doing business with a company because of a poor experience. So that's kind of the flip side, right? We looked at the positive results of using customer data to inform your content marketing strategy on the previous slide. Here we're seeing the sort of flip side, or the negative side, of failing to do that, which is that people might stop doing business with a company because they don't feel like they're receiving that really personalized, high quality, great customer experience. So again, we've got sort of the theoretical or big picture benefits, and then we've got these numbers that back up the value of customer data. And there's way more research out there to support this as well. This is just like a quick snapshot of some statistics that you can find replicated in lots of different ways. Pardon me, I'm going to grab a drink of water. So as I said at the beginning, we're going to talk a lot today about how COVID-19 relates to all of this and vice versa. So why does customer data matter in the time of COVID-19? And I want, again, to just pose that question to you. There's no grading, there's no right or wrong answers, nobody's breathing over your shoulder, but just take about 30 seconds and see if you can either put ideas to paper or just think it through. Why do you think that customer data matters right now in the time of COVID? Again, I'll put about 30 seconds on the clock. All right, so again, no pressure on that. It's just valuable to sort of check in with your own brain and your own capacities for articulation and kind of assess where you are with these things. So let's talk about this now. Why does customer data matter in the time of COVID-19? You might have come up with other ideas beyond what I've shared here. Here are some of the big points from my perspective. One is that if you haven't polled your customers in a while, it's important to do so now. Or maybe you've never dipped into the world of customer data. Great, now is a really, really good time to start. The reason being that people's attitudes, financial standing, feelings, buying habits, and so on are all changing in the face of the pandemic. I mean, we're seeing this across industries. We're seeing people's buying behavior change. We're seeing their needs change. We're seeing their emotional state change and how that relates to their needs and their pain points and all of this stuff, right? So everything is in flux right now. Pretty much everything we knew 6 months ago is not necessarily totally irrelevant, but it's up for discussion, up for evolution, up for change. And it's important that we as business owners tap into what's going on with our customers and our clients right now in this new context that we all find ourselves in, because you want your brand to be able to speak to your customers where they are right now, right? So the content marketing that was effective 6 months ago might not resonate with customers today. And we both don't want to waste time and resources on outdated messaging that's maybe not landing anymore. And, even more importantly, in a lot of ways, we want to be providing that fresh, relevant content that provides value to people now. And so it might be that your existing customer or client base has changing needs and you want to meet them right where they are, or it might be that your entire customer base has changed in some way, right? A lot of companies have pivoted and changed their focus or their offerings in light of COVID-19. So you might be serving completely new people or a mixture of long-standing clients and completely new ones or what have you. So, whether you're still serving the same people and they've changed, or whether you're serving a changed group of people, it's really important to take stock of where your customers are at now. So let's talk about how we do that. How do we get to know your customers now? Enter the customer avatar. You may have also heard this referred to as the buyer persona, the buyer avatar. There's a lot of jargony ways to describe this idea, but they all boil down to the same thing, which is that it's a comprehensive deep dive into who your ideal customer is and what they're all about. And so that could include and should include a wide range of factors, right? So we've got just the basic demographic info, age, marital or parental status, location, income, gender, education, and so on. So, are you serving middle-aged women who are childless, or are you serving young men with 2 children who live in New Mexico? It could be anything, right? Then we also look at psychographics, which is just a fancy word for things like attitudes, hobbies, interests, values. It's more of the sort of beyond the just superficial or on the paper demographics into who is this person? What are they interested in? What are they aligned with? What are they about, right? We also might look at job titles and descriptions, economic standing. Another really important one is goals, challenges, and pain points as they pertain to your product or service. We might also want to look at factors that hold someone back from purchasing. Maybe their media use, where they spend time online, how they consume content. Again, so you can meet people where they are and provide content to them there, right? So that's a lot. And, oh, pardon me, my dog just sneezed in the background, so sorry if you got that. This is a lot, and I'm aware of that. And for this reason, because it's a lot and it's kind of intimidating, and it's very reasonable to look at this and be like, how the heck am I going to figure that stuff out? This is why a lot of people skip gathering customer data. This is why they skip creating a customer avatar, because it's hard. Like, I won't sugarcoat it. It's hard. It's intimidating. There's a lot to it. And it can feel so overwhelming that it's just like, whoop, not going to go there. Put up a wall, right? That's a very reasonable response. I love doing customer avatar work for my clients, and I often really resist it when it comes to doing it for my own business. So I get it from both sides, right? I get hired to do this for other people because they're resisting doing it for themselves, and I also resist doing it when it's just for my business. So I don't want to negate that in any way, right? It is a little intimidating, and I hope that the rest of this presentation will help make it feel more manageable. And I would also say that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You know, knowing something about your target demo or your customer base is better than knowing nothing. So even if you just found out a few of these things and started to build a minimalist customer avatar, that's still worthwhile. So maybe give yourself permission to start smaller and work your way up. The other thing I want to note right off the bat is that when it comes to this basic demographic info piece, there's a lot of debate around how specific a business should be. So some people are in the camp that you need to be completely dialed in on, like, I serve women between the age of 33 and a half and 37 and a half who make $40,000 a year and live in this one town. You know, like, you can get so specific. And a lot of people advocate that you do that. And that is a completely viable way to go. It works for a lot of businesses. I also want to say that I personally do not think that is the only way to go. And I say that because that's not how I run my business. That's not how a lot of my clients run their businesses. And we still run successful businesses, right? Without being that dialed in on the nitty-gritty of the, like, sort of more superficial demographics. For me, it's all about value alignment, right? So that's what I focus on when I speak to my customers. I don't care where they live, whether they're married, how old they are, what they make. I don't care. What I care about is whether our values resonate and whether they're doing good work that I want to support, and vice versa. So just to say, there are lots of ways to approach this. You will find a lot of sources online that are very, very, very hardline about this stuff. And I would just say, give yourself permission to find your way through this in a way that works for you and feels authentic to you and your business and your customers, because that's ultimately the most important thing. Okay, off my soapbox, let's move on. All right, so this is just a visual that I borrowed from Digital Marketer to sort of provide another way of conceptualizing this idea of the customer avatar. So a lot of people will actually create like a visual of a real human being who and start to sort of break down all of these points that we talked about pardon me, on the previous slide. So you might, draw a picture or have some clip art or pull an image from online of somebody who embodies literally your ideal customer. And then you start piecing together all of these bits of information and building out, like, who am I serving, right? So here's just a visual way of conceptualizing that. Okay. So how do we do this, right? I said I'm hoping to provide you with tools that make this all feel less intimidating. How do we gather customer data? And that's what we're going to talk about next. I'm going to grab a sip of water. All right, so there are a lot of tried and true strategies for gathering customer data. And some of them are going to feel more or less accessible to you. So just know that going in, keep an open mind, right? Customer surveys are one of the easiest and most effective and least resource intensive in terms of costs ways to gather customer data. And you can do this in over several different types of media. You could do it online via like an email survey, or directing your customers to a survey on your site. You could do something via social media where you poll people on your social media platforms. You could gather this data over the phone by reaching out to some of your most loyal customers and asking them, hey, would you be willing to chat briefly with me on the phone so I can answer a few questions? So there are lots of ways you can do this, and you can sort of tailor it to what's available to you right now in terms of your time and your sort of level of social comfort, right? Some people feel like they couldn't possibly ask somebody to get on the phone with them, which I would say, just to that point, it's surprising how willing people are to do that. That's something that I do for my clients all the time, and I don't think I've ever had somebody say, no, I won't do that. So if you're falling into the camp of, oh, I couldn't possibly ask that of somebody, maybe reconsider. But also you can start in a less intimidating way, right? By sending something via email or whatever. So just to say, there are lots of ways to do this. And if you're not comfortable with a particular way right up front, try a different way. You can work your way there, right? No matter how you choose to approach people, it's a good idea to survey at least 10 of your most enthusiastic customers. Even better would be 10% of your list, if that's possible. So let's say if you have an email list of 600 people, if you could get 60 to respond to a survey, that would be fantastic. If you have a list of 60 people, then aim for that sort of baseline of 10, even though that's a little more than 10%. And emphasis here is on your most enthusiastic customers, right? We don't want feedback from just anybody who's been hanging out on your email list for years. We want feedback from the people who have purchased and engaged with your products and services and have had a great experience. Why? Because these are the people whose opinion matters the most when it comes to this, right? Because they're the people who are more likely to engage, more likely to remain interested in what you have to offer, more likely to sort of evangelize your brand to other people. So we want to be speaking to the people who are most likely to resonate with us, and not so much the people who aren't really ever going to make a commitment to the brand, right? So once you've selected your folks for surveying, you can ask them things like, how did you find us or this brand? Was it through a Google search? Was it through a recommendation from a friend? What do you like about our product or service? What would you change? How would you describe us to a friend? And you can also ask, demographic information if you don't know that already, like gender and marital status and that kind of stuff. But I think, again, personally, in my experience and just in my professional opinion, that sometimes the more substantive stuff ends up being more valuable to you in terms of crafting a really effective content strategy. You can also, so that's a really primary way of gathering customer data, and I focus most on customer surveys because it's really accessible, it's doable, and it's really helpful. But there are other ways that you can gather this data, either in concert with customer surveys or just on their own. One is, if you have a sales team, or if you're a sales team of one, ask either your team or yourself to consider what are some of the most common questions or resistances or pain points that come up with prospects or prospective customers when you're on a call with them or you're fielding email inquiries. Do you hear the same questions repeating? If so, that's a pattern that can tell you something about your customers. So take note of that. And I would also recommend, again, whether you're your own sales team or you have an entire team, I would recommend encouraging that everyone involved in the sales process takes notes during and or after their calls or emails just to briefly note, like, what questions were asked. Did they have any resistance? Or hesitations, and so on, so that you can begin to track that data and identify patterns over time. And then similarly, another great way to gather data about your customers is to take note of your most common customer service inputs. And so what I mean by that is, once people have purchased your product or service, what kind of feedback are you getting? What kind of questions do people have for you after they've made that purchase? Or what kind of feedback do they have for you after they've made that purchase? Do they come back to you and say, I really, really loved this aspect of this product, or this thing that you did with your services for me was just so transformative? Take notes of those things again, and then set a regular review day where you look back over those notes and can identify patterns. So maybe it's once a month, you sit down for a couple hours, you review your notes from your sales calls and your customer service feedback, and take note of any patterns that emerge there. Another great strategy for data gathering is to review your website and social media analytics and note what kind of content most resonates with your audience. So you should be able to integrate Google Analytics with pretty much any web platform. It becomes fairly user-friendly once you get a little bit comfortable with it. And then also a lot of web platforms today, like Squarespace, WordPress, and so on, have built-in analytics, likewise with social media platforms, that tells you like which posts got the most engagement, how long did people spend on a given page on your website, and so on and so forth. This is extremely valuable data, and it doesn't require any outreach to your customers. It's just there for you to mine and to see what kind of content is resonating, what content is not resonating. This tells you things about your audience, right? So make sure these are things that it's so easy to not do, right? Because running a business is challenging. It takes a lot of time and energy, and these things don't feel urgent. So it's really easy to send them to the back burner. So if that's you, no shame, no judgment, that's normal and reasonable. And it's worth getting something on the calendar, even if it's just once a month, to start reviewing this data so that you can use it to inform your content marketing strategy. Finally, one other sort of simple tool that you can use that, again, is really minimal in terms of outreach or investment is Google's Search Console, and that'll just give you a better sense of how people are finding their way to your website, which can be another piece of valuable data. Like what search terms are they using, because that can tell you something about their pain points or their needs and interests. So all of these strategies are at your disposal. Again, you don't have to start doing all of these tomorrow, because that's just too overwhelming. But maybe you pick a couple of them or just one of them and make it your goal for the next month. And doing that is going to advance you so much more than if you don't do any customer data gathering over the next month. So you can do it. Okay, so we talked about why customer data matters. We talked about what a customer avatar is, and we talked about how to start gathering the data that lets you build a customer avatar. Now we're going to talk about, once you've got that avatar, or you've started putting that avatar together, how should it inform your website copy? And I wanted to focus on the website copy specifically because this is your home base as a brand, right? Like, this is where customer relationships start or meet an abrupt end, right? Depending on whether somebody lands on your website and says, oh, this seems like it's for me, or this seems like it's not for me, right? So your website copy is really important, and it's sort of like a great, sorry, my dog is shaking now. Her name is Hannah. She is my trusty sidekick for this presentation. But anyway, your website copy is sort of ground zero for connecting with your audience. So it's really important to make sure that everything you know about your customers is informing that website. I also want to note that we're about 30 minutes in, so if you need to pause this, go get a drink of water, just let everything settle in your brain for a few minutes, go for it, and then feel free to pick up whenever you're ready again. Okay, so once you've developed a customer avatar, it's time to review your website copy, right? And at every stage of a customer's interaction with your website, you want to ask, is this tailored to my customers based on where they are right now? In other words, does this speak to my customers' current pain points, concerns, needs, and so on? So for example, right now, in a time when more people are shopping online than ever before for more kinds of things than ever before, now would be a great time to be making sure that shipping is as easy as possible, to be perhaps offering free returns so that people don't feel nervous about buying something that is not a good fit and then having to pay to return it. Or maybe offering payment plans because a lot of folks are struggling financially and they might not be able to pay up front for something right now, but a payment plan would meet them right where they're at, which is interested but a little financially strapped, and a payment plan makes something possible for them that might not be possible otherwise. That is thinking about your customers right now based on the context they find themselves in. But again, this is going to vary depending on your customers. Maybe every one of maybe your whole customer base hasn't taken a financial hit. And maybe it's just, who knows? Jeff Bezos, right? If he's your customer, he's probably not taking a financial hit, might not need a payment plan. What does he need? Think about that, right? So it's all context specific. These are just some examples of what other brands are doing right now based on the general trends that we're seeing. It's also important to ask, is this copy or content, whatever it might be, sensitive to the global context? So as we talked about in last week's session, I want to focus right now on emotional, supportive, understanding, uplifting messaging over hard sales. Again, that question of how would you sell during a funeral, right? Sensitively, not hard. So make sure your website copy is reflecting that sensitivity. Make sure it's reflecting an understanding of where your customers are now. It's also valuable to let people know that and how you're available for them now. So I'll show you a few examples in a minute, and I'll leave further discussion of that to the examples. You might also, if you have a brick and mortar element to your business and your hours have changed because of COVID, update that. Share what your policies are in terms of mask usage and so on. And you might even consider adding a COVID-related landing page and or alert bar that takes people directly to COVID-related info for your brand. And again, I'll show you some examples of that in the next few slides. But the point is just to make sure that your copy and your website is meeting people where they are. These are some general examples in the context of COVID-19. But it's also important to think beyond this, right? So if your customers are facing a new need because of COVID, maybe they're parents with young kids who are doing school from home, and maybe, let's say you're offering some kind of, maybe you're a craft store. You could have crafts for kids. You could have a downloadable PDF that's, easy craft projects to do at home with your kids, whatever it might be. The point is just to know what's going on in your customers' lives right now so that your website can meet them there, present them with information that's relevant to them and information or resources that are helpful to them. So let's look at some examples. How can you meet folks where they are on your website right now? Here's an example from Aldi. They clearly thought, okay, we have a significant portion of our customer demographic who's probably feeling pretty nervous about shopping in a public place right now. How can we serve those customers? We can offer exclusive hours to them. to our senior citizens, our expectant mothers, those with health concerns. And they broadcast this, or I pulled this a couple months ago, so I don't know if they're still doing this, but this is just an example, again, of they noted what was going on with their customers and they responded by providing this resource in person and advertising it on their website. So the minute a senior citizen goes to Aldi's website, they're feeling scared about going into the grocery store, and they see this on the website, that says to them, okay, the brand is thinking about them and their well-being, right? And that creates a sense of feeling seen and cared for, which is so important for building trusting relationships. So here's another one. Again, I pulled this from a few months ago, but just an example of, pardon me, speaking to your target demo where they are right now. So I pulled this from a real estate site who was frequently hiring pre-COVID, and so gets a lot of traffic to their site looking for those opportunities. And so they just went ahead and provided a blog post about what they're doing in terms of job availability and recruitment during COVID-19. That means that anybody who comes to their site looking for that information immediately feels like they were thought about, they were considered by this brand, right? Because there is information right here that's relevant to their questions and their needs. Here's another example from Colorado Mountain College, CMC, which I pulled a few months ago as well, which has an example of one of those alert bars that I suggested. So you can see where they've got that big red snowflake, says COVID-19 updates and information, and then again in Spanish. You can click that. So if you are a student or a prospective student of CMC, and you're feeling kind of nervous about what the heck is their plan going to be for, dealing with COVID-19, you go to their website and you immediately see that they were thinking about you, right? And additionally, the inclusion of Spanish language translation or Spanish language information here is really important as well, because it says we're thinking about our entire community, right? And we're making sure that we speak to everybody we serve and keep them informed about what's going on. That's so important for building a sense of inclusion, for making sure that everybody in a customer base or a client base, or in this case a student base, feels seen and cared for. So, and then you can also see that they shared an alert about CMC trustees voting to waive summer book tuition and fees. So again, right away, if I am a student of CMC who is extra financially strapped right now because I lost a job or my partner lost a job or whatever it might be, I can go to the website and I immediately see that CMC leadership is thinking about that, is thinking about the struggles that some of their students might be going through right now and trying to come up with solutions or opportunities to support them in light of those new COVID-specific considerations. So I hope that makes sense. These are, again, just a few examples of ways that different brands are really meeting their customers where they are during this crazy time. And this idea applies regardless of COVID-19, right? Like this concept is still relevant whenever the context shifts and COVID-19 isn't as big of an issue, fingers crossed, sooner rather than later. This general concept of meeting your customers where they are persists, right? So we're talking a lot about COVID-19 because that's the context that we're all in right now, but the same idea applies no matter what's going on. When your customers arrive at your website, or prospective customers arrive at your website, you want to be telling them right up front that you're thinking about them, that you care, and that you're catering to their needs with valuable resources. Maybe I'm a broken record, but if that's the one takeaway you get, because I said it 16 times during this session, that'll be a really great takeaway. Okay, so let's dive even more deeply into some really COVID-specific website content considerations. All right, so we talked about this general idea of meeting folks where they are. Let's go a little deeper and see what are some other considerations that you can implement here. I'm gonna grab a sip of water. All right, so what we know about virtually every customer right now is that they are literally or figuratively potentially having to breathe into a brown paper bag right now, right? A lot of people are stressed. A lot of people are feeling uncertain, whether it's about their health, their loved one's health, their financial situation, or what have you, or, their children's schooling situation. So many things are up in the air right now. So many things are provoking some anxiety, or intense stress for people right now. And so we know this, right? We know this. And again, there are some people who are doing really well right now. I'm not saying everybody fits this image, but the general idea is that across the board, there's a lot of stress and anxiety happening right now. So then the question becomes, how do we meet our customers in this context? All right, so one thing that's going to be really helpful, again, regardless of industry. So the information I'm sharing here is, I believe, applicable to pretty much every business. And then, of course, you can get more specific depending on your actual niche and audience and so on. But one thing we can all do is review the copy on our website for words, phrases, and other content that could be upsetting to people right now, and consider removing anything that might feel upsetting. So that might include this list of suggestions I pulled from WordStream, and it includes things like the language around killer, contagious, health or checkup related terms that we often use figuratively. So the example here is like, give your budget a pulse check. Maybe rewrite right now, right? Because health is a stressful topic for a lot of us right now. Likewise, the words spread, infectious, viral, all sort of have taken on a different connotation right now. So going viral, not just the positive thing that it might have been in the content marketing space 6 months ago. Now that phrase can feel sort of tinged or tainted for people. So maybe we want to speak differently, choose different language. Even the words gather and event can sort of provoke a sense of loss in people, because gathering and going to big events isn't really an option right now. So there are lots of ways to approach this, and that's why it's just really important to sit down and be slow and mindful as you review your website and really think about, could there be an unintentionally hurtful or harmful sort of context associated with what I've written right now? And if so, how can I rewrite it or tweak it to feel so that it's more sensitive to the context and it's not going to provoke any kind of negative feeling or experience in my customers, right? Some other suggestions that are relevant to pretty much all customer demographics, again, I'm continuing to borrow some ideas from WordStream here, is don't lean on scarcity or urgency to push sales right now. So this is a very common marketing strategy, right? Like, you get the emails that say time is running out, the countdown is on, only 4 hours left for this deal in all caps, right? That stuff is stressful. There's an argument to be made, and there is a lot of debate about this, that it's always stressful and it's always to be avoided. But I think outside of that bigger debate, right now it's smart to avoid messaging or marketing that pushes that sense of scarcity or urgency, because people are already stressed out. We don't need to add stress to their plates, and we're not going to create a positive association with our brand if we're busting into people's inboxes and adding more stress to their lives right now, right? So both just from an ethical perspective and from a branding perspective, let's lay off the scarcity and the urgency right now, maybe even forever, because it's certainly not the only way to sell. Another consideration is to make sure that what you're promising is relevant to people right now. Again, so for example, don't promise an amazing huge wedding with all your family and friends, because that's not an option, or it's not a safe option for anybody right now. And so that kind of a promise or an offer is both irrelevant, but also, potentially brings up those feelings of hurt and loss and grief. And we don't need to be adding to that as brands. If your facility is still closed, and again, if this applies to you, if you have a brick and mortar store, or let's say a fitness studio or whatever it might be, then it probably makes sense to get rid of irrelevant CTAs. A CTA is a call to action. So for example, if we run with the fitness studio example, a lot of gyms typically have like a join now button on their website, right? But if it's not an option for people to come into your gym and join now as in-person members, then just scrap that. Or maybe you've switched to offering virtual classes and then it's still relevant. But again, the idea is just to make sure you're reviewing every bit of your website to make sure it's relevant now. And then finally, it's valuable to emphasize safety in your copy. So that might be using language like virtual, in-home, online, so that people know right off the bat, okay, I don't have to deal with the worry of, does this feel safe from a health standpoint, because it's online. And so I just don't even have to bring up or encounter that worry, period, because you kind of cut it off at the quick by letting people know up front. So for example, I believe I mentioned last week that I also teach creative writing on the side. And so in this fall, I'm offering an online memoir writing course. As I market that, I will be making sure that I stress that it's online in every bit of my marketing copy, so that nobody has to deal with the energy involved in that question of like, oh shoot, this sounds like a cool class, but do I feel safe being in person? You don't even have to worry about that, my friend, right? It's online. We got you. And likewise, if you teach courses or offer downloadables that people can download in their own home, then stressing that right now is valuable. Lets your customers know that you're thinking about their safety. Also lets them, again, relieves them of some of the energy or worry that they might have otherwise. You don't want to make them have to click through lots of learn more buttons before they learn, okay, this is an online or a virtual event, all right? Okay, so we are just about at the end. I'm gonna grab one more sip of water. And let's sum it all up. And I would encourage you, actually, before I do that, and I've kind of given away my sovereignty on these slides already, but look away if you're looking at the screen. And I'm just gonna put 30 seconds on the clock again, and I want you to think back over this presentation and just jot down, what are some of your takeaways? And again, we talked about a lot here. We talked about why customer data is helpful. We talked about what a customer avatar is. We talked about how to begin gathering customer data. And then we talked about how to let the information you know about your customers inform your website content and copy, specifically as it pertains to this context of COVID-19. So that was a lot to cover. So I want you to just take a few moments, 30 seconds to be exact, and jot down what are some of your takeaways from this discussion, and then I'll share my sort of summary. Awesome. So feel free to keep writing afterward if you've still got some ideas to jot down. Here are my takeaways as it pertains to customer data. The main thing is really just to keep checking in with customers. It's important always, and it's especially important in this context of COVID-19 because people's lives are going to continue changing for the foreseeable future, right? Like right now, so many things are being rearranged, work, school, and so on. Socialization, events, all of these things are in flux. So people's lives are going to be staying in flux for a while. So keep checking in with them, keep learning what's going on with your customers so you can keep meeting them where they're at. It's also helpful to know, we didn't talk about this much, but many businesses will experience a bounce back surge, which is just like a jargony term for the fact that when there's a lull or a setback in business because of some sort of socio-political or socioeconomic shift, there's often, not always, but often like a resurgence of interest in the business down the line. So let's use the example of like a yoga studio, let's say, that had to close when COVID-19 first hit. They probably experienced a big drop in customers and income, right? And so it's really reasonable to suck back when that's happening because you don't have as many resources coming in. But in fact, it might be helpful to prepare for a bounce back surge, meaning prepare for the possibility that there will be a major influx of customers whenever yoga is accessible to them again, right? So that might mean, let's say the business switches to an online model and suddenly you can access a much bigger customer base because you're not location specific anymore. You might be serving way more people than you were even before COVID. So that's just one example. This can be true in lots of different industries. So you want to be prepared to capitalize on the potential of a bounce back surge. And one of the ways to do that is by keeping your finger on the pulse of, and there I go, using that language that I said don't use, right? By continuing to check in with your customers so that you can perhaps anticipate an incoming surge of new interest. And again, so when that surge happens, or if that surge happens, you're prepared to meet those new prospects right where they are and deliver high quality, valuable content to them right off the bat, right out of the gate. And then finally, staying in step with your customers helps you stand out from the pack. It conveys care because continuing to check in with your customers takes time and it doesn't have an immediate financial payout, right? So to do it requires some thoughtfulness, some effort, and some care that, quite frankly, a lot of businesses don't put into these relationships. And it can be hard. Again, it is time consuming, but it's also really valuable, both from a human standpoint and from a business standpoint. If your customers see that the whole way through this pandemic, you've been devoted to showing up for them, learning about them, hearing what's going on with them, and catering to their needs and evolving lifestyles, that is going to mean that your brand stands out now and in the future. And whenever people have the resources, again, to invest in products or services, they're going to be a lot more likely to go with you because you've demonstrated that caring and that investment, right? So those are my main takeaways. Again, there are many more things that you could take away from this presentation. And I'd love to hear if you want to share any takeaways that you have. But these are just some closing thoughts to send you off with. So finally, I'll do this every session. I've shared some resources with you in this last slide. So feel free to, you could take a picture or screenshot this. Pardon me. It's just if you want to dig deeper into building a buyer persona or a customer avatar, there are lots of strategies. There are lots of ways of visualizing this. Some work better for individuals than others. So I just wanted to throw a bunch of resources at you and you can sort of parse through them and see what sticks. And as always, if you have questions for me, feel free to email laura@humankindcopy.com. Otherwise, I will look forward to sharing the next module with you next Tuesday. Thanks so much for spending this time with me. Hope you have a great week.